Melbourne has been the most livable city in the world from past 7 years. This year, it lost its top spot to Vienna. Issues such as rise in population, housing affordability, crime, and public transportation have been the major concerns. Melbourne is the fourth fastest growing city on the planet at the moment. By 2050, it is predicted to grow till 8 million, which is equal to New York or London.
If Melbourne continues to grow at the same rate, how the city will just get so crowded, and how we need to consider other solutions like do we need high-rise and mid-rise developments within the inner or middle suburbs a bit more? Do we need those satellite cities? But just Melbourne can only grow so much. There's already almost at capacity in the city sometimes, it feels like. So there needs to be better and smarter ways to either for Melbourne to grow at the same pace of the population or for the population to spread out over a wider area, I think.
Population in Melbourne has grown significantly, exceeding expectations. To buy a house, people in Melbourne now need $121,000 as a deposit that used to be $69,000 a decade ago, which is why it is hard for a regular wage earner to afford it.
My son has moved 55 kilometres out of the CBD so that he can afford to buy a block of land, and that's not even a house, that's just a block of land. It's really expensive. So, they were looking locally to us, and they were looking at 700,000 as a starting point, and so they've decided to go further out, and they're becoming rural Victoria.
Melbourne's public transportation has been in a catch-up mode and is expanding and improving rails to meet expectation of people in Melbourne.
And in that time it has grown at an extraordinary rate. However, some of our honourable politicians, and I say that in the most sarcastic possible way, have not really ensured that we've kept up with infrastructure. So things like public transport, which I had the great displeasure to rely upon this afternoon. It took me an hour and a half to get into the city, which would have normally taken 25 minutes.
Urban congestion has become one of the major concerns for Melbourne and a major issue in the upcoming elections in November. Melbourne's policy target is for 80% of homes to lie within 1 kilometre of basic amenities, schooling and public transportation.
Both the opposition and the government are facing quite a challenge with the question of livability in the city of Melbourne and in the larger expanding city that Melbourne is becoming, because it is really just moving further and further out into the hinterland areas. And of course, once you get that, you get a lot of questions that come up around the kinds of services that people need in those new areas. So the question of livability and what either oppositions or governments can do is quite a live one, particularly now as we're coming up to the next elections in November. I think there's ways to manage that growth. I don't think growth in numbers or significant increases in the population of Australia should be too much of a major challenge for us. We're a large country, we've got a relatively small population. It should not be a major issue for our policymakers to deal with the kind of expansion that's being talked about in terms of population over the next few years. However, it is.
Victorian elections are less than a month away, and promises by major and minor parties have been made for housing affordability and public transportation. Kavya Barba from